Hey, my name is Mark Hanson. Kristopher Conrad and Yuriy Khinotskiy could not join me to narrate this project, but I wanted to tell you about our ME401 final project. Uh, the goal was to metal cast a Rubik's Cube, all the little pieces, and have an actual working Rubik's Cube. We'll get into our level of success in a little bit, but a Rubik's Cube is challenging. What really attracted us to this project was the idea of making an assembly. A Rubik's Cube has 27 pieces, including one core, 6 faces, 8 corners, and 12 edges. So I'm gonna do my best to freehand this one, but the cube itself looks a little something like that. And I'd recommend to any of you to just whenever you get a chance, tear apart a Rubik's Cube. Look how they work, because it is fascinating how that works. Anyways, all these pieces interlock, and the idea was to allow the sliding and have, just something really different. All these individual pieces would interlock. You've got your faces here. Like I said, 6 of them, 1, 2, 3. 3 of them are hidden. You've got your edges, 1, 2, 3, 4. Another 4 in the middle layer, and another 4 on the back layer. And then you've got your corners, and there's 8 of them. 8 corners to a cube. The core is on the inside. The idea behind this was we were going to cut little holes, little narrow holes in each of these, if one note will stop being a butthead, cut little holes into each of the faces. And then we would cast a bronze rod. Then this bronze rod we cut up into small little wafers. Imagine like a penny, a little bit smaller than a penny, but sort of like that. Apply a colored patina to these rods. So, we'd have red, we'd have blue, we'd have a white maybe, different colors, whatever you want to. And then take those, put them into here. So that was the basic idea, and that's what we started off with. Our first attempt actually included trying to use silicone molds, homemade silicone molds. Heard about them from our instructor Laura and Matt Rogge. He was, as I was bouncing ideas off of him, he was the first one to suggest, make a mold. Basically what that involved was taking an actual piece, making the silicone mold, pouring wax into that silicone mold. So start with a piece, go to a silicone mold. From the silicone mold, you go down to wax pieces, which you could then make into an actual mold. We chose ceramic shell, but I'll get into that more later. And then from the actual mold, you get your metal pieces. That was the idea. Unfortunately, as we started working with the silicone molds, found it difficult to work with them properly. It was a bit of ignorance on our part, but with the time crunch at the very end, we ended up not able to produce enough silicone molds to produce enough pieces to cast. Ended up destroying the molds. The molds look a little bit like this. One of these was done by Laura, I believe this one. That's why it looks better. And then this was our terrible first attempt. But like I said, we weren't able to make that work. So we ended up abandoning that issue and going with a slightly different idea. Um, we sacrificed actual Rubik's Cubes. Uh, right here, you can see the jig I set up on my drill press. And the idea was we would take the pieces, tear off the stickers, tear down the pieces of the Rubik's Cube, and we would drill holes down into the actual pieces themselves. So we drill a little half-inch hole right in there. With this jig set up, we were getting really consistent holes. The height was set up so that we only drilled a specified amount of distance each time. It actually worked really, really well. I had to reset the jig for the centerpieces. At first, I tried taking off the centerpiece and then drilling it on that jig. It did not work out too well. So I ended up just leaving the centerpieces on a cube. I believe this was our third or fourth cube that we were tearing apart to get the pieces. Anyways, I ended up just leaving the centerpieces on the cube and drilling down into the pieces. That worked much better. At one point, this drill actually caught onto the cube and made the top layer spin round and round and round and round really fast. It was hilarious. The hardest part about disassembling the cube, I mean, the edges and the corners come off real easy, but the current construction of these plastic cubes is that there is a pin sticking down through the top, through the faces, I should say, into the core. And those were really, really hard to get enough clearance. It's not so much that they didn't hacksaw off fairly quickly. That didn't take much effort. It was being able to fit the saw blade in there without destroying other pieces, because we needed to preserve these pieces. These were going to be our original patterns. A little bit of lack of foresight on our part. So each of these edges got 2 holes, and each of these corners got 3 holes drilled into them. These voids we filled up with wax. That way it would cast properly. We wanted these pieces to be solid. So what I ended up doing was taking pieces of cardboard, wrapping them around these pieces to cover the excess number of holes that had been drilled, and then pouring wax. You can see the pieces of wax and some of the scrap wax. Of course, there's the propane torch I was using to heat everything up. I didn't explain myself very well. Basically, if you had a little cubie, this would be just one piece. We drilled a hole there. We drilled a hole there, and we drilled a hole there. Pouring wax down into the top, and wax came out the sides. So that's what the cardboard is for. Clamped it on there. I do not have a picture of this, but actually the wax is hot enough to make the ABS pliable. What does that mean? That means I lost a couple pieces because I clamped the clamps a little too close to the piece, and rather than being nice and square when they came out, they became a little more oblongish. Oh, by the way, all the artwork is free. I am not charging you for any of this. But yeah, they came out a little oblong, and because all the pieces had to be regular, they basically had to have high integrity to the original pieces. We couldn't have that. So we lost a few pieces that way. Of course, we had bought several Rubik's Cubes, so we weren't hurting for pieces. So, here you can see the holes drilled into the pieces and how they were filled with wax. I had to take everything back on the jig briefly